In this video, we're going to talk about 5 tips to dominate any of the ranked modes in Halo Infinite. While everyone has modes that they typically like or they're good at, there's always a mode where you feel like you just dislike it or you really struggle. So let's talk about the biggest things that you're doing incorrect and some tips and tricks that you can incorporate in your gameplay so that you can dominate your opposition with ease. But the GameLeap website really takes that a step further, where we break down in-depth VOD reviews of pro players and high-level ranked gamers so that you can exactly see the decision-making that you should be utilizing and incorporating in every single game you play. So if you really want to get to Onyx and above, do yourself a favor and go check it out right now down below. Now, the first game mode in question is actually Stronghold. And the biggest mistake that I see players make on Stronghold is they keep wrapping around and around and around. It's like they're running in circles. They cap A, then B, then C, but by the time they're at C, they already lost A and B, so then they wrap back to A, cap that, but then they lost C, and it's just like an endless cycle of capping and losing and capping and losing, until eventually you get caught out by an entire team that is just waiting for you to catch you off, and you just die for free. Essentially, what you need to understand is that it's about map control, not map momentum. You don't need to be running around non-stop like you have ADHD trying to cap every single point. That's never gonna work. What you realistically need is the central point, and it's going to be different depending on the map you're playing. But let's take Streets, for example. That B site is the central point because it has the high ground and it has control of the lanes. Plus, it's the midpoint between both A and C. You control that, and then from there, you take all efficient and advantaged team fights because you have the most line of sight to all enemies moving around the map, and you have the easiest access to all the power weapons. So from there, you should have a fundamental advantage. You win team fights, and then it's really easy for you to control the midsection and then one side of the map. Now, a big problem that happens is people will have that B and that C, and maybe they just want one team fight and they get a little greedy. So 2 people will go run and they'll go grab A. But what's the big problem with that? Well, enemies are now going to be forced to spawn somewhere where you control. So they'll typically spawn C now, and now enemies will take your C right away, or the entire team will spawn closer to the 2 guys that are alone and kill them, or they'll take a fight with the 2 guys that are alone on B and kill them. And now you just lost the most important point. So as a general rule of thumb, don't get overly greedy unless you're just stomping the enemy team. Just make sure that you control the central midpoint of the map, all the lanes to the power weapons, control only 2 points, and win team fights consistently with your advantage, and you will win Stronghold. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about is capture the flag. And there are 2 big problems I see with capture the flag. The first one is people just ignoring the flag. They just go do their own thing and they don't help with their team. I think capture the flag needs the most team cohesion out of any freaking mode. And it's very important to not only help your teammates when they're moving the flag around the map, but sometimes pick the flag up as well. Oftentimes watch the rotation and the routing of the enemy team. There's a lot you got to juggle, and it can be pretty difficult. The number one thing that you should be trying to do in each and every game is control the lanes of engagement, the routing lanes, going to and from your flag to the enemy flag and back and forth. Knowing where these lanes are, controlling them, having information about where they are, and being able to deal damage to enemies running through them is the best way to help, because if your teammates run through, you can deal damage to the enemies chasing them. If an enemy runs through, you can deal damage to them while they try to get to their objective. Regardless, having really high up positions and controlling them is going to allow you to control the mid space and really help your team. And one of the big things that I see often when people fail at capture the flag is they just have like all players grouped up all together, right? You have every single player, all 4 players, they run, they go cap that flag, and then they all run in a giant grouping back, right? But the enemy just capped the flag as well. And here's the problem. Enemies are gonna have much more space on the map, so they're gonna have much more powerful weapons. They're gonna get free weapons, and now they have your flag, you have their flag, but they also have all these really powerful items and weapons, and they're just gonna fucking roll you. So it's really important that you kind of split the difference where you send multiple people after the flag, yes, but it is really important to take those high grounds, monitor all those weaponry and items and try to grab them as well without getting too split up from your team, and then just making sure that enemies that ever get isolated, get caught out, or are running with the flag alone, they take ample pressure and damage so that if you ever want to pivot to a full team fight, you already have the advantage there and you can win it with ease. Now, the next big mode that we got to talk about is everyone's favorite. No, I'm just kidding. A lot of people hate this mode, and it's freaking oddball. And the most common strategy that people utilize is playing edge of the map, right? This is really freaking common on live fire where people play in tower, and you push tower and you're like, all right, I guess I'll push tower. And then they have freaking manglers and they have heat waves. And then when you finally win enough freaking fights to take it, they just jump off and they reset. And you're like, what the fuck? All right, well, I guess they have the odd mode again. I don't know what to do. Well, here's what you actually need to do. The first thing that you need is to force the enemy to reset the oddball, because that's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to reset that oddball. So a great way to force them to do so is by putting ample pressure and winning the team fight. I find way too often that teams just try to bum rush the oddball player. What you need to do is you need to control the entire area around tower first. Try to take advantage fights from multiple angles, because remember, enemies are all going to be stacked near that oddball, and some players are going to be, you know, at the base or around the corner. And if you fight those players together, kill them, heal up, you get to go fight and try to take tower with a bigger fighting force than the enemy. Plus, if they don't drop the oddball, they're already going to be down someone. Now, when you have the ultimate advantage, you need to push up and encroach on the person with oddball who's undoubtedly going to kill himself, right? But as the enemy is going to commit to that, two players should probably split off and go to try to contest the oddball as it spawns, and then the two players are going to join them. And you have to understand that if you rotate this correctly, whether it's you and an ally, or if you make sure to not just dump all your resources and trade out to get the enemy to SD, you're going to be able to have a bigger team and fight for that oddball a lot cleaner. A lot of times people just want to force them to drop that ball as fast as possible, even if it means the entire team gets traded out or dies, and then the enemy's going to respond first, and the oddball is going to be exactly where they want to grab it, and it's going to not matter that you pushed in, you aggressively prevented them from getting like 3 or 4 points, only for your team to all die and then the enemy to get the ball right back in their possession. The other thing that often comes up is whether to hold or frag. And I know you see clips of like Lucid just popping off while he never holds the ball and people get pissed off, even though he's really carrying the entire damn game. And oftentimes in your games, you have no one that wants to carry the oddball. And it's really a weird situation because on one hand, someone needs to hold it, right? You need to hold the freaking oddball if you need to win the game. And in many games, that might need to be you. But on the other hand, it's important, especially when you're solo queuing, to be aware enough to know, are you the best fragger on your team? Are you the one that is going to kill the most amount of people? Because having people constantly put out pressure and capable of winning their 1v1s allows you to never get into that situation where the oddball player is overwhelmed and your team have to reset. And you can win multiple fights before you have to reset. But in your games, and this is something that you have to be brutally honest with yourself, if you are popping off and fragging out, then there's a lot of situations where you should not be holding that ball. Make someone else do it. If no one picks it up, who freaking cares? Because if you have two players that are on your team that, you know, are 3 and 16 and they never want to pick up the ball, or they rarely do, it's not going to help you win if you are just tucked in a corner grabbing that ball. In fact, it's just going to make you frustrated. So it's really important to understand when you have to grab the ball or when you should, if you have other people that are doing the job and slaying out correctly. And it's important for you to understand when you shouldn't be grabbing that ball at all, and instead you should be taking the carry role. So the last one that we got to talk about is none other than Slayer. And some people love Slayer and some people hate Slayer, but the main thing that you need to understand about Slayer is it's all about high kills, low deaths, right? How much value can you get out of each and every life, and how many kills can you get out of each and every life? You know, if you get 2 kills for every one of your lives, then you're gonna freaking have a huge advantage in that game. The big lesson here is try to get kills and value and make it so it's impossible for you to get traded out. This means that if you secure a single kill, it is almost always correct for you to disengage to where you're safe, especially if you have no idea where enemies are and you don't know if enemies are nearby, because every single time you're in a conflict with an enemy, they are going to be calling to their team. They're going to say, hey, he's cracked, hey, he's low, hey, push him. So instantaneous, the second you get that value, your number one goal is trying to make it out there alive. Now, if it's a full team fight, it's a little bit different. You want to make sure that your team wins the fight overall. Like if it's a true 4v4, you want to make sure that your team has at least one player left standing, and that's a net positive for Slayer, right? But in a true 1v1 or an isolated engagement, you want to get that value, get that kill, and disengage. And if you ever see a situation where maybe you're fighting someone, they're weak, you're weak, and then another enemy like comes into the fray, it's better for you to disengage and live to fight another day than it is to force that engagement or try to force that trade, because the goal is to get positive kills, right? You're trying to net a kill, not trade a kill, and only trade if that's your last option. But typically you'd always need to be positioning and thinking about, how can I get this isolated fight or this value and dip out and keep that value intact. Now we have a lot more in-depth tips and tricks and VOD reviews showcasing gameplay on all of these modes on the GameLeap website. So if you really want further examples and more in-depth examples, you got to go check it out right now down below.